Hello there, everybody. Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of The Sheehan Show. And today, what we will be previewing is the big PFL finals card, which goes down this week. And it is, it's going to be a long card. There's lots of five-minute rounds of this, with the championships being decided in the PFL. In the main event, with Kayla Harrison versus Taylor Guardado. We have Magomedkerimov on the card against Ray Cooper, and loads more as well. On paper, it's a good card. I have a few thoughts on that, but let me first, before we get into all of that, let me just quickly run through the bracket, talk about the people who are in the playoffs, what weight classes, and the final matchups as well, just so we kind of set the stall out and know where we're going from there. So let's do that first. So in the welterweight, we had Rory McDonald against Ray Cooper. Obviously, Ray Cooper won that, and he will be taking on Magomedkerimov after he beat Sai in his semi-final. So that is the welterweight decider there, with Cooper versus Magomedkerimov. In the lightweight semis, we had Martinez against Radzhabov, and in the other side, we had Clay Collard against Manfio. A bit of a shock, obviously, with Clay Collard losing there. He lost to Manfio, and he will be fighting Radzhabov in the finale this week. At women's, we'll start at the heavyweights first, actually. Cappelozza fought Jones, and Cappelozza won that. And Delija beat Gostilov, so it's a Cappelozza-Delija final. Then Antonio Carlos Jr. Beat Emiliano Sardi to get to the final here, and he's fighting Hamlet, who beat Fahea in that one. And then over in the featherweight side, we had Brendan Loughnane, obviously a bit of a shock there, I suppose, in a very close fight, which I thought anyway. A lot of people didn't, against Khaybulaev, and he will fight Chris Wade after he beat Bubba Jenkins in that, kind of epic wrestling match, maybe you could call it. And then at women's lightweight, as I mentioned, the unstoppable Kayla Harrison, which we will get to, will fight Guardado in the final after she beat Marais in her semi-final. So my thoughts on it first before we get into the matchmaking, and maybe I'll actually have more thoughts on this next week and flesh them out a little bit better. I think one of the biggest problems for the PFL is the lack of the ability to guarantee the stars will get here. So they signed Verdum, they signed Pettis, they signed Loughnane, who's obviously a star in the UK or in Ireland, this side of the world, and they didn't manage to get all the way. Kayla Harrison, okay, did, and she's so fantastic. She always is supposed to get it, but that is both the good part of the PFL, but the bad part of it as well. A lot of people probably listen to this and go, look, they lost their fights, and that, I would probably tend to agree with that as well. But it also makes a card like this just like a little bit less intriguing, or some of the semi-final matchups, which I just read out there. Like, not all the big names are even in that. Like, someone like a Tom Lawler as well didn't make it through. And that is the issue with the tournament and playoff format, that you're not always going to have it. Like in the UFC, if they decide whoever is getting the next title shot, they're getting the next title shot. Okay, they might need to go and win one fight, but they don't have to guarantee themselves in any way. And I'm sure a lot of fighters would like that. They would like to have to sing for their supper or fight for their opportunities. But in the PFL, it's a little bit different, and thus leads to things like this happening. But however, that maybe is a discussion for a different day. Today, we're going to look ahead to this card and kind of break down some of these matchups. Some of these matchups are there's some of them which I think aren't are mismatches in a way. Let's put it that way. And one of which might be a little bit surprising, and it isn't a tournament fight, which we will get to in a second. But there are a few fights as well which aren't in the tournament. I'll just mention them first because I won't go into great detail on them. But Omari Akhmedov has come over and signed from the UFC. He takes on Jordan Young at 185. They did this with Loughnane as well last year. Give him one fight, getting prepared for next year's tournament. Same with Don Madge, I would say, who takes on Nathan Williams. Don Madge went 2-0 in the UFC. I think some sort of visa issues or something like that. Or I'm not exactly sure, but he was released by the UFC anyway, and he will be coming over and I'm sure fighting in the PFL tournament next year. And also Julia Budd coming into the 155-pound division, which is a very interesting thing. I suppose the chat about if Kayla Harrison is going to stay for another year is maybe a chat for another day as well. But she's fighting Caitlin Young this year. And like Julia Budd's 3 losses, ever. She's only lost to Amanda Nunes, Ronda Rousey, and Chris Cyborg. So that is a serious test for Kayla Harrison if that does happen. So that's a big fight there for me, or a big signing anyway for PFL, because it's a genuine test. There are very few genuine tests for someone like Kayla Harrison, and maybe Julia Budd is it next year. All going well, maybe in 2 weeks' time, Kayla Harrison will be signed to the UFC, and this will be null and void. But as we speak, I think that is the way to do it. So let's start in the main event, and let's talk about Kayla Harrison. And look, having watched a couple of her fights last night preparing for this, she is what you expect her to be. She looks more comfortable on the feet, I suppose, than maybe you would expect, but her judo is just so good. She's just so tough and so strong in that clinch, and just pulls you to the ground and lands so much stuff on top. She's just a real athlete, in a sport where it doesn't matter if the men's or women's side, we don't see, we're seeing more now, I suppose. Throughout the years, we haven't seen that many top athletes, world level athletes, but she absolutely is one in the 155 pound division as well. She's allowed to look at, as I mentioned with Julia Budd, there aren't that many challengers. No one has gotten near challenging Kayla Harrison. But as I mentioned, just a quick thought on her on the feet. I think she is beginning to look more comfortable. Now, we don't see too much of it because if you look at the fight, what is it, 2 weeks ago now at this stage, Mackenzie Dern, and look at Jason Perillo's cornering advice in the middle of that fight, where he says you have to jab and work your way in to get inside, because she was fighting someone like Rodriguez, who's a very, very good fighter, and she has to work her way inside. She has to earn that takedown. Obviously a world level jiu-jitsu player, Mackenzie Dern, as opposed to a judoka like Kayla Harrison. And she has to work that way inside. Now, Kayla Harrison can do it maybe better in the clinch and stuff, but Kayla Harrison doesn't really have to work her way inside as much as someone like a Dern does, because the level of competition is kind of frozen at times against Kayla Harrison, and she can literally just walk them down and win that battle to get inside, to get the fight into the clinch, to get the fight to the ground. So that is one thing that is kind of, there's a horse racing term here that they use, unexposed, when they haven't raced against other really good horses. That's the kind of thing I would say for Kayla Harrison. It's not that she isn't able to do that. It's that it doesn't that part of her game hasn't been exposed as good or bad yet. So, that term exposed is used a lot in MMA. I don't mean it like that, but you get what I mean, that she will have to face that level of competition before she proves she can do that one thing. But once she does get in there, there's no question. She's just fantastic. And she's fighting, Guardado here. Taylor Guardado 3-1. Kayla Harrison now, what is she, 11-0? She probably wouldn't be fighting Kayla Harrison if this was matchmaking, and I'm talking about mismatches on this card. This is one. Like Guardado, watching a couple of her fights, she looks less comfortable striking than Kayla Harrison, and that is a bad sign, because she's a good wrestler and everything like that. She's a nice jab at times, but she wings big punches. Not the most active on top. She, in that fight, the 4-inch fight with Maurice, I think she got stood up in that fight as well. So, she's not the best fighter in the world. We all know Kayla Harrison is going to win this. Maybe Guardado will show a little bit of fight in the takedown, to stop Kayla Harrison maybe taking her down easy. I think that is the biggest area where she can give Kayla a little bit of trouble. But when I say a little bit of trouble, I literally mean a little bit. This should be another cakewalk for Kayla Harrison. And then the questions will be asked, what's next? Is Julia Budd enough of a name for Kayla Harrison to stick around in PFL for another year? Is that £1 million enough to keep her around? How much will she be getting paid if she goes straight into UFC and is fighting a Jermaine Durandamy or a Holly Holm or someone like that, or a Dumont, as we saw performing very well last week? Much tougher matchups for probably much less money. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they go in and they offer her, $500,000 to fight, and she says absolutely no problem. But you can leave it in the comment section. Do you think that's likely? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm cynical in my old age, but I don't think that's going to happen. So maybe another year with Kayla. And also, she's Amanda Nunes' teammate, and that is a tricky one, I suppose. I think they will fight. I don't think they have come out and said they won't fight. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's interesting. Maybe that's a chat for next week as well. So yeah, that is the main event of this one, and I don't think it'll be a fun fight, to be honest, but I think it'll probably be a fun decimation for Kayla Harrison. One that shouldn't be that, I don't think, is the co-main event for the 170-pound title, where Magomedkerimov takes on Ray Cooper III. These two lads fought before in the I think it was a tournament final back in 2018, and Magomedkerimov won that fight via guillotine. We know Ray Cooper. He's been around that bracket for so long, fighting so well. He's a guy who comes in and he throws big hooks. I'm watching him. He's a guy you wouldn't say has natural power. Like, you look at, say someone like a Conor McGregor, who has natural power, who hits you, and look, is more than that as well. But there's other people like it as well. I think Sean O'Malley even is a guy who has kind of natural power. Maybe he's not the best example, but Johnny Hendricks, a guy who had natural power. A Junior Dos Santos had natural power back in the day. I don't think he is. I think he's more raw power and puts everything into it and just forces you to be knocked out almost at times. Ray Cooper does. But having watched that fight before, he came out strong, but was immediately taken down. And that's the problem against someone like Magomedkerimov. Even when he tried to take him down himself, he ended up getting choked and guillotined because of it. Magomedkerimov, watching him, he's so strong. He's an absolute bull in there. And he's more of a, lots of guys when they get to the ground. Habib is a little bit like this as well. They wrestle, and then Habib kind of moves to the jiu-jitsu grappling more than the wrestling grappling, if you know what I mean, where he's controlling, he's looking for something, he's moving around, he's looking to take the back. I think Magomedkerimov is a little bit like that as well. He will control for a while, but then he moves and moves and moves, and he's looking for that submission, and he's looking to be kind of funky on the ground. And fighters like that are brilliant, because it's not boring. Sometimes when you get on top and you just lay on top, it can be very boring, and it's for the viewers that maybe don't understand it, or maybe don't understand the pressure like a fighter would, or a coach would, and how tough it is to fight in that way. I might find it very boring, but Magomedkerimov is not that. His ground game is just so good. He looks for submissions. Even on the bottom, he looks for submissions, or when he gets on top, and he looks for the finish. And on the feet, he kicks so well. His leg kicks, his high kicks. He's kind of half hoping to be taken down. We've seen fighters like that before, as I mentioned, that great guillotine. And he's so long as well with his shots. He just reaches for that jab so well. And it's going to be an interesting matchup. I don't think it'll necessarily go the same way as it went before. I think Ray Cooper III even needs to be a little bit cuter here, I think. And what I mean by that is, that might be an Irish colloquial term maybe now here, but I think he needs to play the game a little bit. I think if he goes in with that raw, natural power I was talking about, I don't think it's the best thing in the world. Now, we could break down Ray Cooper here for a good point and talk about his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu and his different parts of his game, but I think it will come down to his striking here and his ability to kind of be careful with it. And I think he needs to try to land those hooks against Magomedkerimov, come out and stay away from him and run around. That's going to be tough for 5 rounds, and maybe take it 5 rounds, and maybe land enough power shots to make them pay over 5 rounds of Magomedkerimov, maybe even go to the body. But I don't think it'll be enough. I think it's a tough one. It's a very, very tough matchup. Ray Cooper III is a very, very good fighter. But yeah, Magomedkerimov, I think, is just maybe a little bit of a level above. So looking forward to that one, obviously, for the 170-pound championship. Claressa Shields on this card as well. And let's talk about her altogether, because that's the way it's lined up here. I have watched Abigail Montes, and I was looking at the betting line, and maybe the betting line will change. I'm recording this a couple of days out. But Abigail Montes is a big underdog here. And honestly, if this was just fighter A versus fighter B, MMA fighter A versus MMA fighter B, not world championship greatest of all time, not behind Katie Taylor, obviously, boxing champion, this wouldn't be as wide as it is. Abigail Montes is a good MMA fighter. I watched both of her fights. She has good takedowns. She's a good striker. Now, obviously, she's not in the level of Claressa Shields if they're just going to be boxing, but she kicks from range. size might be a bit of an issue, and I think that will be the big thing here. But if she isn't phased by the name she's fighting against, if she can manage to get through those punches, I think Abigail Montes to me is favourite to win this fight. And now I might be completely wrong. She might get knocked out in 5 seconds, but look, that's how the cookie crumbles. And if I wasn't here to give my opinion, I'd turn the camera off and I wouldn't do it. But that is my opinion. I haven't watched her fight and haven't watched back the Claressa Shields fight as well. Now, the one thing I will say about Shields in that fight, and I said it afterwards over in Severe May on the podcast, she showed absolute great toughness. A lot of people would have given up in that position. A lot of people, I'll go back to boxing. This MMA stuff isn't for me. And she didn't. She didn't give up. She refused to give up, and she ended up winning the fight. And, that is something that you can build from. But what is it, a few months since that fight, to come back in here with someone who, to me, and having watched 2 fights, looks as good as Morris does, or as Montes does, sorry. I've Morris on the brain from the semi-finals. I think it's a tough matchup, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. This is a serious test for Claressa Shields, so that's a good one, and that's going to be obviously on the middle of that card. Then we have the 145-pound fight between Movlid, Khaybulaev, and Chris Wade. Obviously, Khaybulaev fought Brennan Loughnane or Loughnane as they call him. It's an Irish name from my part of the country, so I'm calling him Loughnane because that's how you properly pronounce it. This to me, look, sometimes you get wrestler versus wrestler and it turns into a kickboxing match. I don't think this one will. I think this is going to be a wrestling match. Like, okay, Khaybulaev has a flying knee KO of the year contender of Devin Jackson a while back, but he's a wrestle first, well-rounded fighter. He absolutely does everything to set up his wrestling. But if it's brought to, if it's a kickboxing fight, he can kickbox well. There's absolutely no problem with that. He moves his hands in like a very odd motion, a very quick kind of herky-jerky motion. He's a very risk-averse fighter, which makes for a lot of close fights. He fought. His 2 fights were very, very close in PFL getting to this, or his last 2 fights even. And Chris Wade, you saw him against Bubba Jenkins, and that was a close fight as well. But he won out with the wrestling, and I really think like Khaybulaev or Chris Wade, when you look at him, right, he's a guy who throws a lot of kicks, as I mentioned in one of the fighters earlier, to kind of who was it? Let me just look here. Who I said it was? Magomedkerimov. He throws high kicks in the hope he almost gets taken down. I think Chris Wade is sort of the same, but he throws very technically good kicks and kicks very well to the body. In that, if someone tries to take him down, he's going to scramble and probably end up on top. So he's happy enough to do it. And I think that will get him taken down against Khaybulaev because he looks for those sort of opportunities. He looks for those sort of takedowns. And I think he probably will take Chris Wade down. But then will Chris Wade be able to scramble up and get on top or push him against the cage? This is going to be a tough battle for 5 rounds. I think maybe less than 5 rounds if someone can get on top. But this is the sort of fight, right, where someone will have to get broken to win it, I feel like, or else it's going to be very close. I don't think it's going to be a fight of the year contender or anything like that. Far from it, I would say. But if you're looking for tough battles, if you're looking for close matchups, I think this is probably the one for you, and I'm really, really looking forward to the battle, if maybe not the fight itself. After that, I'm going to skip the heavyweight and come back to it because that's the fight I'm kind of looking forward to most, I think, on this card even. And the 205-pound finale next against with Antonio Carlos Jr. against Marthin Hamlet. Watching Antonio Carlos Jr., obviously we watched him for years fighting in the UFC and beyond. And he's a lad who probably strikes more maybe than he should. He's an absolute wild man. He goes for everything. There's a reason his name is Shoeface, but his jiu-jitsu is brilliant. When he gets on your back, he's just stuck to you. He's like a backpack. Not the best wrestler in the world though, but he only needs one opportunity to take it. And Marthin Hamlet, though, he's a very good wrestler. He's heavy on top. He's a bit stingy with his strikes. He doesn't throw that many. But when he does throw them, it's odd because he's a very fast striker and looks to me very, very powerful. He fought for the Cage Warriors title over 5 rounds as well, so that'll benefit him, fighting Montes Bukowskis in that one. And like the problem for someone like Hamlet is when he is a wrestle first type of fighter as well. If you're fighting Antonio Carlos Jr. and you're wrestle first against him, you're getting into a jiu-jitsu battle then if you can't just kind of lay on top of him. And I wonder what Hamlet will do here. Will he be that wrestle first guy and try to lay on top and try and believe in his game, because when he does get down and he does get on top, he's very heavy there, as I mentioned, doesn't throw that many strikes, but will open up when needs be. He's been stood up in a few fights and things. I'm very interested to see what his game plan is, because if he kind of stands there and attempts to wait for those opportunities against Antonio Carlos Jr., he will get them and they will present themselves to him, but they might actually present themselves to him too often. And then he's left in a situation where maybe he's gassing out and it's a 5-round fight. So this is one, I look at all the other fights and I kind of, Chris Wade Cappelozza, I think that'll be a wrestling match. Kayla Harrison, I think she'll take her opponent to the ground. I think Montes will probably take Claressa Shields down if she is able to get that far. And with Ray Cooper and Magomedkerimov, I think that's probably going to be a bit of a wild fight and end up on the ground as well. This one, haven't a clue. I really don't know. Could this be a kickboxing match for 5 rounds? How good is Hamlet's jiu-jitsu against Antonio Carlos Jr.? Is Antonio Carlos Jr.'s jiu-jitsu good enough off of his back to submit Martin Hamlet, who's very heavy? I don't know. I really don't know. And that's the joy of MMA. We will have to tune in to find out. Right, let's go. I look at the heavyweight fight next. The person who stood out to me most watching tape for this is, and I watched him before, but when you watch him more specifically for the final, I think it stands out a little bit more. Bruno Cappelozza. I think he's a wonderful fighter. He reminds me of a young Junior Dos Santos, very athletic for a heavyweight, not maybe the biggest heavyweight in the world, but he throws these sustained, fast, powerful attacks. A little bit more heavy on the volume than Junior Dos Santos, and he hits like an absolute truck. He knocked the guy out in his I think it was his last fight, and the guy was kind of knocked out before he threw a punch, and he didn't realize, and then he kind of got knocked. It was absolutely insane. And then Ante Delija, he's a more long guy, and you see a guy coming from, I think he's from Croatia, isn't he? He's from Europe anyway, and you think he might be a bit of a kickboxer, and he does kickbox, pretty well, but he races in with strikes. But he also is more willing to kind of clinch and wrestle. Hits very hard when he's in ground and pound. And he's one of these guys as well, maybe a little bit of a Randy Couture style of push you against the cage and hits hard in the clinch like that. And, if you're to look for a style, a fighter to fight Cappelozza, that's probably it. Wear him out, take away those sustained, fast, powerful punches, and take away that pop from him that he has early in the fights. If I was Delija here, well, I probably wouldn't take the fight because I'd be too afraid. But if I was in his body and his mind, I think that's what I would be trying to do, trying to wear him out, trying to make this a 5-round fight. But this is another very intriguing fight to me. I think we know what both guys will do. Delija will strike with him. I make no mistake about that. And he'll try to jab him. Maybe try to keep him on the end of the jab. But the second Cappelozza comes in, I think he will be going for takedowns and he will be going for the clinch. Whereas I think Cappelozza will be looking to open up because he is an open fighter. Delija is at times, and he gives you those opportunities. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's Cappelozza will be looking for that knockout. He will be looking. Will he get it? I suppose we will see on that one as well. And the last championship matchup is Loik Radzhabov against Raush Manfio. And watching Radzhabov. And I can't pronounce his name because I always watch these fights on on mute, which I realized I get to this, I was like, wait, I know him, but I can't pronounce it. Let's go with Loik. That's his name. This guy is a maniac. Just pure and simple maniac. He fights very square on. He just launches into punches in the hope of getting a few takedowns. He's brave, but his head is straight up in the air. But he's the type of lad you just do not want to get into a war with. You just do not, because he will win that war. He kicks with his left leg to the body constantly. He has absolutely no care in the world for his own health. He will take 10 punches to get you taken down or to hit you a few times as well. Just an absolute maniac of a fighter. And you know what? I'll be absolutely tuning in to watch him because he's as fun as anything. Brilliant. Manfio then... he beat Collard and Pettis, so something is working for him right as well. Way less output than he's kind of just constantly waiting. His big left hooks are kind of to the fore. That's what his front hand is out always, looking to hook all the time. Throws very little, but that, like I mentioned earlier as well with another guy, that leads to closer fights. Now, against Radzhabov, that he's not going to be allowed to do that. This guy only knows how to fight one way, and that's full bore, fifth gear, 150 miles an hour. That's the only way this guy is going to fight. And I very much doubt that 5 rounds will play into this man's mind. He's a maniac. And I can't wait for this fight. This is the fight. Look, Manfio, if he can bring it to his sort of fight, maybe it won't be the most exciting fight in the world. But I just don't think he can. I just don't think he will. And I'm really looking forward to this one. Might not be the standout fight in terms of names, but Radzhabov, he's probably going on Team Sheehan here, especially if he wins, because he's such a fun fighter, and I can't wait. I really can't wait to see this. So yeah, all in all, a pretty good card from top to bottom. As I mentioned it again, the 3 undercard fights are Nathan Williams against Don Madge coming over from the UFC, Julia Budd coming over from Bellator to fight Caitlin Young, and Omari Akhmedov as well against Jordan Young. And obviously then higher up in the card, to take a break from the title fights, we have Claressa Shields against Abigail Montes, and then the main event is Kayla Harrison versus Taylor Guardado for the women's 155-pound title. We have Magomedkerimov taking on Ray Cooper III for the second time for the 170-pound strap. 145 pounds, we've Movlid Cappelozza taking on Chris Wade. At 265 heavyweight, we have Cappelozza taking on Ante Delija. At 205 pounds light heavyweight, we've Marthin Hamlet out of Norway taking on the Brazilian shoefest Antonio Carlos Jr. And for the 145-pound title, it is Raush Manfio taking on Loik Radzhabov, and that's it. It's a big card. PFL's big night of the year. It could be a long night, or it could be a very exciting night, but sure, look, we'll be here to watch it anyway. We'll be here to see it, and I hope you will tune in for all of the coverage on Sherdog for that. My name is Sheehan. Until next time, enjoy the fights.